I am recording now, and I'm getting my stream up.
Being absolute class, boys. I hope you've enjoyed your...
No, go away. Okay. So, what is it that you're working on again?
The master-crafted heavy bolter captain.
And what is this for?
My Crimson Wolves, my custom Space Wolf chapter.
Okay. So, tell me a little bit about them. Like, where did they start off at? You know, who do they belong to?
So, they actually start during the Horus Heresy. They are one of the great companies that are under Lehman Russ at the time, because he had 13 great companies, and he sent this specific one to go hold the Fenris system against the Alpha Legion. And after defeating the Alpha Legion, because they're awesome, they got pulled. The entire planet that they were on, which is known as Canis, and all of its moons got pulled into the warp. So they were stuck in the warp for 10,000 years, trying to survive and not get corrupted by chaos. None of them did get corrupted because they're space wolves, and so they can handle chaos corruption pretty well. But yeah, after 10,000 years, they got spat out, and they got detected by the Imperium, and one of the other custom Space Marine chapters, the Light Bearers, actually found them and brought them to Fenris, and that's kind of where their origin story ends.
Okay. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your chapter master?
So, Chapter Master Man, his name is Baldur Crimson Wolf. He was the Wolf Lord of the Great Company at the time, and he was leading the first and second companies of the Crimson Wolves to Canis in order to hold off the Alpha Legion from getting to Fenris. And I actually have his model somewhere around here. Here he is. Let's see. Yep, right there. This is his model. I used the Ragnar Blackmane model, and I gave him a Grey Knight helm, and that will be explained in a second. So he led his forces onto Canis, and they were fighting the Alpha Legion. And as I just said earlier, they got pulled into the warp. And he kind of emphasized making sure that they take care of their gear, holding down a fortress. In fact, while they were in the warp, they built their fortress monastery, which is known as the House of Morkai, compared to the Fang that is the regular Space Wolves. And so when he got out of the warp, he was very disoriented, didn't know what was happening. He wanted to make his way to Terra, but the Lightbearer chapter master informed him that the Horse Heresy is over, and the Imperium kind of won, kind of lost, but kind of informed him about all of that. And then he participated in many of the notable campaigns, like the Month of Shame, where he killed a Grandmaster of the Grey Knights, hence the helmet, where he took off of the Grey Knight and is using it as his own to remind the Inquisition that they don't have all of the power that they think that they have. And then they also have he also has the his weapon. His weapon's name is Gungear. His special little chainsword there. And after the fall of Cadia, where Logan Grimnar pulled all of the space wolves back to help defend Cadia, he crossed the Rubicon Primaris and he became a Primaris Space Marine.
Okay, sounds like he's been through quite a bit.
Yeah. He has a he's kind of got like a best friend kind of sorts that has kind of gone through this all with him. His name is Torlund Fohammer, and I also have a model of him. In fact, he should be right on my shelves over here. So this is Torlund Fohammer. He's got the big ol' axe here and then a shield. He is Baldur's right-hand man. Where Baldur goes, Torlund goes. And he often advises him, and he is in charge of Baldur's Wolf Guard and his council, known as the Aesir, that he is over, and is kind of like his advisatories and his Wolf Guard and all of the leaders of the legions that he's a part of. And now I say legions because the Crimson Wolves are a non-codex compliant chapter. Their Marines go well above 1,000 Marines. And only Baldur, Torlund, and Logan Grimnar really know the true number of Marines. Other than that, it's probably hidden from everybody else.
Okay. Do you have any big plans for your army?
One of the big plans right now that I'm working on is a completely firstborn army. The way that this is going to be represented is during the holding of Canis, the first and second companies were taken, and there wasn't any Primaris Marines at the time, so this completely firstborn army is going to represent that first and second company who went with Baldur into the warp and onto Canis and held that for 10,000 years. But other than that, not really. I might just work on expanding their army a little bit more, adding some more units. For example, I've got an ancient right here. He's going to be the flag bearer of the Crimson Wolves. Other than that, no real big plans just yet.
Okay. And then do you have like any plans to incorporate any other Space Marine custom lore in with yours, or are you just trying to keep it as just your own little world?
One of my best friends, his name is Bryce. He has his own custom Space Marine chapters. They are called the Light Bearers, and if you'll remember that name from before, it's the chapter that actually found the Crimson Wolves whenever they got out of the warp. They over time those two chapters got very close, and so they often fight alongside of each other. In fact, in the Dawn of War 2 game, um, in the what's it called? The survival mode that they have for it. We named our Space Marines and we created lore for them based off of the Marines that are in that Dawn of War 2 game.
So those two chapters are very close.
So those two chapters are very close. I know my chapter and your Sunset Dragons are going to probably get or actually you're going to be changing the name of them here pretty soon. But my chapter and your chapter are going to have some lore together.
Yes. So my custom chapter, kind of workshopping it because they're a Salamander successor chapter, and they're originally called the Sunset Dragons because their color scheme, which right here, as you can see, I don't know if you can see very well, where it kind of transitions from a yellow to an orange right there. But I kind of don't like the name Sunset Dragons because it's just kind of too on the nose. So I'm working on workshopping a brand new name for them, and that's actually what I was doing while he was explaining this information. Is I was looking for different words for dragon and different words for sun, so that way I can come up with something unique.
What names have you got going on right now? Like
So what names have you got going on right now? Like what are the top names that kind of bubble to the top?
So it's not really names, but for a different word for dragon, I found Draka, which is an ancient word for dragon back in things like 12th century, 13th century. And then I also have Wyvern, or Wyvern, however you pronounce it. And then Worm, which is a different term for a long lizard, pretty much.
Dragons.
Yep. And then for the sun, I have Solar, Surset, Sol, Helios, Sunburst, Luminary, and Aurora.
The Helios Wyverns? Ooh. That sounds pretty good.
But so I haven't worked too much on the lore for my chapter, but it's there. So at one point they were fighting with the Salamanders as part of the Salamander Legion, and what was it, Ishvan 5, where they got massacred. So there's about 150 Space Marines who hopped on a ship and managed to escape. But when they were trying to do a warp jump, a bunch of crap happened and ended up launching them somewhere into the distant galaxy, and they ended up crashing on a planet where they had no communication for thousands of years with anyone else.
So the Sunset Dragons also started, or the what are we going to call them as a placeholder name? Just the Sunset Dragons?
Yeah, Sunset Dragons is for now.
Okay, so the Sunset Dragons also started during the Horus Heresy.
Sort of. So the Ishvan 5 massacre happened, and then they hopped on a ship and went into the warp and got launched out into a planet. But they didn't fully become the Sunset Dragons until about 2,000 years later, because they were busy exploring the planets because they had no idea what was there. And they were being attacked by flying lizards that they could not see because it was happening like instantaneously. But then they end up finding a giant settlement, and it turns out that the giant lizards that they're fighting are dragons. And the dragons are the knowledge holders of the entire civilization of this world, and they're the ones who are actually guiding the civilization to success. And then about yes, and
so they were protecting the civilization, which is why they were attacking them.
Yes, and then so the civilization actually accepts them in, but they only had about 150 when they landed there, and after all the attacks and trying to get to this, just find a safe haven, only about 80 to 90 of them are left, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to keep going forward because they're slowly losing their numbers, and they don't have any gene seed to replenish what they've lost. They have no way off the planet currently. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to keep going forward because they're slowly losing their numbers, and they don't have any gene seed to replenish what they've lost.
So
They have no way
they
off
have
the
a chapter
planet
master of any
currently.
kind. Like, do they have an appointed leader?
So they do have a chapter master. I'm still workshopping him because I haven't kind of
Okay.
decided on what I wanted to name
So
him
do they have a
or
chapter
anything like
master of any
that.
kind? Like, do they have an
But
appointed
eventually,
leader?
I do plan on having a full name for him and kind of what he's going to be equipped with. But when they become the Sunset Dragons, the chapter master actually ends up going on a pilgrimage to meet the oldest dragon for guidance. And then they actually end up doing kind of like a oath binding with blood where he takes some of the dragon's blood and then it ends up altering their gene seed. So now they don't need Vulcan's gene seed to keep producing, but it also makes them more dragon-esque. It gives them a different skin tone. It gives them different eye colors, and they also live longer. But it's a lot harder for their initiates to complete the training, so their numbers are relatively low at all times. It gives them different eye colors, and they also live longer. But it's a lot. They do not know what the Codex is because they haven't been in contact with the Imperium for at least like
And are they
5,000
codex
years.
compliant or are they non-codex compliant?
They do not know what the Codex is because they haven't been in contact with the Imperium for at least like 5,000 years.
Okay.
So what do you think their new color scheme is going to be? Are you going to change their color scheme at all, or are you just going to keep it kind of the same?
So most of the Army's color scheme is going to be this
so
color of the
what do you
chaplain
think
that
their
I
new
have.
color scheme is going to be? Are you going
But
to change their color
so
scheme at all, or are you
apothecaries, I
just
decided
gonna,
I want to do something a little
keep it
different,
kind of the
and they're
same?
going to have a black armor color with possibly some sort of accent color for cloaks and stuff like that. Anything that's a chaplain type model is going to be a white/gray color, and then I'll figure out accents for that. And then for company champions and ancients, I'm still kind of thinking along the lines of what I should do with them. But for the dragons in this planet, they breathe a blue flame. So I'm thinking of possibly pushing into a blue hue of some sort to go along with this orange yellow coloration.
If people wanted to look at the models that you're showing off, where would they kind of look at them?
Coloration.
And if people wanted
Can
to
you
look
rephrase your
at
question?
the models that you're showing off, where would
So,
they
like,
kind
when
of
you
look
say
at that?
like this color or showing off a different kind of model, where would people go and look at the
Can you
models?
rephrase your question?
Because people can see the
So,
models and
like,
I'm
you
looking at
say,
them, but
like, this
not people
color
listening.
or showing off a different kind of
So
model.
I'm
Where would
actually
people go and
recording the
look at the
video,
models
and
that
I'm
you're
also
looking
doing
at?
my own
Because people can see the
stream.
models that I'm
But
looking
most
at.
of these
Some people may
videos are
not
going
be
to be
able to see
cataloged and put
what you're
onto my
looking at.
YouTube channel, which will eventually probably become both of our YouTube channel, and it's called 6-5 Dice. And that's because it's a nickname that was given to me because I couldn't count how many dice need to be played, and I ended up saying
Okay.
6 and then 5 because it was supposed to be 5 dice.
So back to the Sunset Dragons. So
All
they
right. All right.
don't have any contact with the Imperium. What is kind of like
So
their
back to the
situation?
Sunset Dragons. So they don't have any contact with the Imperium. What is kind of like their situation? Do you have like a have lore that so that they can recontact the Imperium, or are they still not in any kind of contact with the Imperium?
So my plan is I want them to act like dragons, where they're selfish, they're powerful, and they do a lot of hoarding tendencies. So they're not going to risk their lives to go intervene in conflicts that just don't require somebody of that nature. And because of that, they're not really going to be in contact with the Imperium, but they're going to be aware that the Imperium is out there, and eventually they'll be helping out the Imperium in some points in necessary battles, but they'll have their own battles that they'll need to participate in that I haven't fully went over yet.
Okay. Okay. So this is still very workshoppy. I'm coming up with this as I go. Kind of
Okay,
thing.
okay. So this is
Yes,
still
yes, it
very
is.
workshoppy. I'm coming up with this as I go kind of thing. Okay. Um, let's see what else to do.
So,
Could
is there
probably
anything
fix
else about
the
the Sunset
auto
Dragons that we
color.
need to know?
They have one of the hardest color
So,
schemes to
is there
paint. For
anything
some
else about the
reason,
Sunset Dragons
my
that we
friend here
should
doesn't
know?
think it's very difficult. I make it a lot more complex than it needs to be. But he doesn't understand that to do this kind of gradient transition, it's actually a lot more work than you think it needs to be.
That is very true. I do not think that your color
Not
scheme
like
is
my
that
color
hard.
scheme is hard either. My color scheme is easy.
But
But
it's not like my color scheme's hard either. My color scheme's very easy, but I just don't think yours is hard.
So the tricky part is that I'm
Just a little
painting
bit.
yellow on there, and a lot of more experienced painters know that yellow just doesn't work when it comes to painting in general. So what I have to do is I have to do a white undercoat, and then the
Right.
way that I get the transition
Right.
is I do a pink zenithal highlight, and then I go in with the yellow to do the yellow coloration, and then from there I do a hotter orange color is because when the yellow touches the pink, it comes out like a warmer yellow color. But I do a small zenithal from the very top of a hot orange to kind of fulfill the full gradient transition.
okay.
Okay.
But if people have like any like advice or any questions or anything, they can feel free to ask them or give them. And if you have your own custom chapter, we are actually looking at kind of making our own quote unquote universe where it follows the lore that's going on, but we have our own little side stuff that's going on along with it. And we would actually like to include people's own homebrew chapters in our story and how we're going to progress it.
Yeah, and something about sending in your chapters for discussion and all that.
Yeah,
We actually
and
have an email that
something
you can send
about
it to.
sending in your
And
chapters for discussion and all that. We actually have an email that you can send them to. It is the homebrewed hobbyist, TheHomebreweD,
and that's where you can send
hobbyist,
some info for for your
HOBBYIST
custom
at
chapters, for your
gmail.com.
custom
And that's
painting,
where you
your
can
custom
send in your
camera levels,
submissions
your custom travel logs, and your
for
custom
your custom
training
chapters or your custom anything, your
courses
custom
for
Necron
homebrew
dynasties, your
fun
custom
stuff that
craft
we send
worlds,
in
your custom
for
Tyranid
discussion
hive
when it
fleets,
comes to every
your
chapter
custom forge
on
worlds, all that kind of stuff can be sent
Homebrew.
in, and we will discuss them in the coming episodes and going on from there.
I'm not doing any painting right now like my friend because I ended up doing like a whole room moving for my hobby space because where I originally had it, it just wasn't working out in there because it was getting in the way of actual important parts of the house. So we ended up moving it around. So I have everything kind of packed up into a corner and kind of thrown about on the floor. So I can't do any painting at the moment because it's just a mess to get to, and my color scheme doesn't allow me to be what's the term? Just like kind of go for it. I kind of need to be more precise and take time to do it because if there's a mistake, it's really hard to correct the mistake on my paint scheme. Mistakes do happen. Paint does chip, but I prefer it to be like a small chip than like a scratch over it because battle damage is cool and all, but I suck at painting battle damage and it's just not gonna look good.
Right.
It's
I'm
not
also
all
very
fun.
bad at painting battle damage. That is not a thing that I am very good at. That's why all the models that I paint are kind of clean and they don't have any real battle damage. They might have a scuff here and there, but they don't. it's not really any kind of true battle damage.
So a cool thing about the planet that they landed on, the planet actually does have a knight, and this knight was the only protector of the planet for haven't decided yet, and it was the color scheme of the sunset because the dragons were the ones who breathed flame over it and singed the armor to this orange glow, and then they proceeded to adopt that orange glow and painted the armor of the knight the sunset color that I'm talking about. And it has this cream color here for the accents, so that way if they do any decals on there or have like any word markings, it'll pop on this orange surface. And this knight actually will be fighting along with my custom chapter once it eventually gets finished because it's a big model and it takes quite a bit of time.
Right, right. And speaking along with the lines of knights, on in the Crimson Wolves, some of their one on their satellite moons, because there's four satellite moons that are orbiting Canis. On one of their moons, there's actually a knight house that has been residing there ever since the Crimson Wolves came to Canis, and it's House Viri Fortissimi. And I actually have a knight that's kind of in the scheme of the house in the process of being painted. So I'll scoot this out of the way. And I'll scoot this up so you can see it. But yeah, it's going for a red, gray, and a brass kind of color scheme. You can see that there's some Space Wolf bits on it, kind of tying it to the Crimson Wolves a little bit. And yeah, so it's gonna. This is kind of the start of the house. This is actually going to be a Baron of the house. Baron Sigurd is the actual pilot's name. I have not made a name for the knight itself yet, but that's kind of the direction that I'm going to be going with my knight army when I eventually make one.
So the reason why I came up with my custom chapter was because salamanders are my favorite Space Marine chapter, but I don't like the lore of them because I like playing lore fluffy armies. But for them, they don't use any jump pack units, any vehicles with wheels on them because the gravity of Nocturne is very heavy and the gravity on the moon base is very light. So vehicles just tend not to work, same with jump packs. So I wanted to run a list that goes along with the way I like playing, but along lore wise. So I created my own custom chapter, and a lot of them have, still have multi meltas, but they also have jump packs. I have land speeders, vehicles that have wheels, just because I just think it's cool. It works a lot better than a slow army, in my opinion, because salamanders are very slow but durable. But I wanted to be quicker because I realized I was losing a lot of my games because I was just too slow.
Right. So you built your custom chapter around how you wanted to play 40k. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So why do these salamanders differ from, or these sunset dragons differ from salamanders? Like, was there a need for a change?
So the change for them happened because the planet that they were on had the gravity was a little bit more. Let me think. So the gravity wasn't more dense than Nocturne, but the gravity, what's the word? Is it pressure? Or I don't know the term for it, but the gravity is different where it allows them free movement with vehicles, and the vehicles kind of really aren't hindered in any real way. But their environment caused their bones to become more dense, caused them to actually grow more because of the blood from the dragons. And when they took the blood, it actually changed their skin tone from being pitch black to being more of a brown color. And then their eyes went from glowing red to just glowing like a whitish blue aura. And then their eyes went from glowing red to just glowing like a whitish blue aura.
So the dragon blood changed their gene seed itself. It's not like a one time mutation. No, it changed how they operate and how they look.
Yeah, so really they're not salamanders anymore because their doctrine has changed on how they operate, how they conduct themselves. So they personally, the term I would use is they kind of transcend the salamanders because they're better than the salamanders in some ways, but because they are more greedy and everything, they kind of lose what they originally were fighting for, which were civilians and everything. So they would still go out of their way to help civilians, but they're not going to throw their lives away to make sure every civilian makes it off that planet. It's because they're still greedy and there isn't very many of them.
Right. Right. Now, are they that same way with their home planet and to the people that are in their home turf?
So with their home planet, they're more willing to put their lives on the line because that's where they do all their recruiting and all their bases located. It's because the only people they trust to inhibit all their strengths and be like dragons are the people who were pretty much raised by dragons. Because in order for them to become a sunset dragon, they go through the process of similarly going through what an Astartes would go through all the surgeries and getting a gene seed implanted. But when the surgeries would happen, they actually get dragon components integrated into their body. So, like, they'll get the flame organ of a dragon. I don't remember what it's called. It actually has a name. But they'll get, like, bone grafts from the dragons. They'll get muscle grafts from the dragons. And then when they take the blood from the dragon, it causes their body to kind of go into a hibernation state where it starts melding with all these components that have been grafted. But it's really risky, and not a lot of people survive it. So that's why their numbers are low, because it's not like a gradual thing over years. It's like this person's made it through all the training. We'll do their ceremony tomorrow of them going through this process, and then we'll know by the day after that if they're going to live or if they're going to die.
Oh, okay. So it's a very rapid process. It's not like an actual Space Marine kind of thing where it takes years and years and years, but instead it takes a very short amount of time to make an actual Sunset Dragon.
Yes and no. So the process to start beginning, it's a very short amount of time, but it still takes a longer time because their body still has to get accustomed to all these changes. But the kind of the kickstart of it or the beginning processes happens almost immediately, and then it's kind of like a slow, gradual thing from there. But most of the transformation process happens within the first 2 days.
2 days. Wow, that's a lot of change for a short amount of time. So that's probably why they don't really survive all that long, huh?
Yeah,
Because of the rapid
they
change.
tend to die pretty frequently. They only do about 20 recruits a year out of their population, and it's usually uh, the kids that are the most highest prospect of being like a generational warrior, where they're going to be the best warrior of that generation, and they only accept at most 20 kids who would be like that. and then they go through the process of training them, and then the kids have the choice that if they don't want to continue with the process, they can say, I don't want to take the final risk. It's okay. There's not going to be any serious repercussions. They understand the process and how dangerous it is. So the child will probably end up going back as a teenager if they decide that they don't want to go through the process anymore. And typically they get appointed to a higher position once they go back, even if they come from a poor family, because they still went through this entire process to be this amazing warrior, that they're still going to be better than normal people. But the ones who do continue the process can be anywhere from just like 3 to 7, and typically only about half of them would make it through, and that's if that's a really good cycle, so to say.
So they have an option to become Space Marines or not.
So
Really?
an option within reason. So like I said, it's only like the top 20 generate of that generation. So occasionally there'll be a few more where like there is a kid, like a village out in the middle of the boonies, and they have a kid there who shows really great potential. They'll make an exception for people like that. But typically it's only about 20, and when they're going through the whole process, they can't make their final decision almost up until the point to where their transition has to start.
Okay. So they have an option up
Correct.
to a certain
Once
point,
they get to the
and then
points where they
after
say
that
let's do the
point, there is
surgery, there's no
no
like
backseas.
it pretty much happens like you go to bed, you wake up, we're doing it.
Right. Okay. So I guess I can talk about the recruiting processes of the Crimson Wolves now. So the Crimson Wolves on their home planet on Canis, it's actually much like Fenris because it's in the same system that Fenris is in. So it has 4 main continents, and each of those continents are all separated by vast oceans. So these oceans are very, very large, filled with all kinds of creatures that you can imagine, and it's very, very dangerous to cross them during the summer times when the planet is closer to the sun. But over the winter, these seas, the kind of top level of these seas, freeze over, and you can actually travel from continent to continent on foot. Now, the fourth continent, the main kind of smaller of the continents, is all the way in the north, and it is the home continent of the House of Morkai. So the Crimson Wolves have set up shop on the northmost continent of Canis, and on the other 3 continents there are tribes. There are many, many tribes, but there are 3 that kind of bubble to the top. So there are the tribe of the lion, the tribe of the bear, and the tribe of the eagle. And all of them kind of, they don't really go by those names, but those are the High Gothic translations of their language because they have a different language than High Gothic. So that's kind of the translation that was given to them from by the Imperium. Um, so the Crimson Wolves actually kind of recruit from all tribes, and they usually have a ton of recruits. And not only do they recruit from Canis, they recruit from the other 4 moons as well, because the other 4 moons that Canis has are populated. They just aren't populated as heavily as Canis is. Um, so each of the tribes actually will go to war with each other while the seas are frozen over. And these wars are kind of quote unquote they're friendly because everyone on Canis recognizes that they're all fighting for survival. And if there are any captives in these wars, they're often sent back to their tribes, and their tribes get to deal with the weakness that they showed. Now, how they deal with that weakness, that's up to the tribe. It's up to the tribe themselves. There's no uh, no executions of captives or anything like that. They are sent back to their home tribes. Um, but the Crimson Wolves will oftentimes give weapons or even fight for different tribes to kind of strengthen the resolve of the tribes people on Canis, and will help them grow stronger as tribesmen. And as I said, they will go to other planets. They will recruit from the tribes on those other planets, and they have a really good, strong relation to the Night House that I mentioned earlier, House Viri Fortissimi, and their High King. So that's kind of how they very much recruit like Space Wolves do. They use the tests of Morkai. They do the Canis Helix ritual. It's very much the same as the Space Wolves because they're Horus Heresy Space Wolves. They are from the Horus Heresy. They did not really deviate off of the thing that was set before them.
Something else that they do is that
Something else that they do is that Baldur gets visions from Lehman Russ. So it sounds kind of weird, but every couple hundred years or so, maybe 10, 50 years have passed, he'll get a vision from Lehman Russ, and Lehman Russ will say, "Go and search for me." And so Baldur will send out search parties. And so these search parties usually contain about 15 to 20 Marines, and they have their own little cruisers that they go and set out on. Baldur himself, if he's occupied during a campaign, will not go out on these missions because he's occupied in a campaign. He can't really do that. But he will send out search parties for Lehman Russ in order to find him because he misses his Primarch. He fought alongside his Primarch during the Horus Heresy, and he longs for that to happen again. So he goes out and he sends search parties for his lost Primarch. So that's kind of the recruitment process and a little bit more about Baldur himself. Yeah.
So how does their society work? So I know some people are probably going to call them furries.
Their society is a very harsh contrast to the current society of Space Wolves, where they're all about wolf, 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 wolf. These guys kind of go back to their Nordic roots, which is why you'll hear many names go along with Nordic mythology. For example, Baldur Crimson Wolf's weapon, it's Gungir, which is Odin's spear. The council that is under Baldur Crimson Wolf and led by Torlin Fodhammer is called the Aesir, which is the name for the actual Nordic gods. And all of their vehicles are named after Norse monsters. So, for example, you'll have different vehicles that are named different things. So, like, for example, this Stormfang right here, its name is the Draugr. So it's named after Nordic monsters. You'll have a different one that's called oh gosh, I forgot the other ones. I have them all written down somewhere, but I don't remember them off the top of my head. But they are a harsh contrast to the current Space Wolves and their wolf, 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 wolf. It's more Nordic than wolf because I personally don't like that. I personally don't like that they kind of went more towards the wolfy side. I kind of wish that they stayed towards the Nordic roots.
So we haven't went over it yet, but how would you say that the Sons of Dragons would interact with the Crimson Wolves?
How would they interact? Uh, Probably on one of their searches. In all honesty, like one of the search parties found the sunset dragons on the planet that they're on, or during a campaign. I guess they would find where the sunset dragons are at and kind of introduce themselves. I don't know. How do you think that the sunset dragons and the crimson wolves would meet?
I it probably would be on one of your search missions, and I think that the interaction between them would probably be, let's say, more like my Sunset Dragons would look down upon your Crimson Wolves, and it would be kind of like almost like a passive aggressiveness until they fight together or get put in a conflict where they have to rely on each other, and then that's when their bondmanship for friendship would start. But they would still kind of be on rocky terms with each other until that relationship develops.
Okay, so it's gonna be a rocky relationship no matter what. So I have a comment here. How did the Crimson Wolves come to 40K? So they are actually already in 40K. They came about during the Horus Heresy, where Lehman Russ sent the first and second companies of a great company out to defend the Fenris system from the Alpha Legion. And so they came upon this world of Canis. And they were fighting the Alpha Legion on Canis, and they beat the Alpha Legion, thankfully. But after they beat the Alpha Legion, a warp portal opened up and swallowed Canis whole. So they were stuck in the warp for 10,000 years, battling different mutated demons, chaos demons, and just surviving in the warp for as long as they could. And eventually, in the current setting, they were spat out back kind of the same place where they were at. So that's how the Crimson Wolves came into 40K in the current setting.
And also, I have to mention light bears because light bears is actually.
And also, I have to mention the Light Bearers because the Light Bearers is actually how they entered back into the Imperium. Because the Light Bearers were on a crusade, one of their crusade fleets, and in fact, the chapter master of the crusade fleets met with Baldur Crimson Wolf, the chapter master of the Crimson Wolves, and kind of told him what's what and what's up.
If you get any more questions, feel free to answer them, even if they're for me. I need to find where I put my parchment paper for my wet palette so I can start painting again.
Okay. Do the Crimson Wolves have any unique units that only they have? Yes. They have perfectly preserved cataphracti Terminator armor. Um, this is because they are a Horus Heresy force, and back in the Horus Heresy, they had cataphracti Terminators. They are known as Relic Terminator armor now, but they have really, really good condition Relic Terminator armor that they make use of pretty heavily. Um, Sometimes they have they kind of pull from the Wolfen, but the Wolfen are kind of like a mainstream kind of thing. But the thing that they really have is that Cataphracti Terminator armor and some of the more Horus Heresy vehicles, like the Demos pattern Deimos pattern Predator, I think. Predator and the Rhino. I know that I'm going to get a Sakaran tank sometime soon, and that's going to be added into the Crimson Wolves. A Spartan, they have a really good Spartan. Basically, it's allowing me to, gameplay wise, use the Horus Heresy units in the current 40k setting. Gameplay wise.
Okay, I have returned.
Welcome back.
So your legion's pretty much numerous, so like you don't have like any worries about like losing a Gravis unit. You'll have another Gravis unit to replace them.
Right. Because they're non-codex compliant, so they're just going back. What do they think of Rowboat Gorilla Man and the Codex Astartes? Here's the thing. So they knew Rabute Gilliman during the heresy and after he woke up. So they kind of have a different view of Rabute Gilliman than most Space Marines do, because not even Marneus Calgar knew him during the Horus Heresy. So they actually have a lot of respect to Rabute Gilliman, but to the Codex Astartes, it's just a giant middle finger. They do not care for it at all. But they have a ton of respect for Rabute Gilliman because of, number one, how he's handling the Imperium out of, because the Crimson Wolves have the same kind of attitude as Rabute towards the current Imperium, and where they really dislike where it's at and how it's very far from the Emperor's vision, but it's their duty to protect it. And so they respect Gilliman in the fact that he's working with what he has, but they aren't Codex compliant at all. They do not care for it.
So back to the topic about how your guys can fill in the spot if you lose a Gravis unit or something. For me, for my chapter, I do not have that capabilities because they are so low. So I'm actually working on a cool conversion here where it's a apothecary with a chapter banner, because since their numbers are less than 100, they have to fulfill multiple roles. So he's going to be playing either as a chapter. Man, I just spaced on the name. A chapter ancient or an apothecary. And when they need like certain units fulfilled or certain slots, they'll just hop into whatever equipment that they have available to fulfill that mission.
So because their numbers are so low, they're dependent on changing out different roles if need be. So an apothecary may be trained as an ancient, but a chapter master may also have to fulfill a what's it called? Apothecary role. I just said the word and I didn't even say it.
Correct. So they modified their Terminator armor so that way they can fit into it better. So they're bigger than a normal Space Marine. They're probably, I'd say that I haven't decided on how big they are yet, but I know they're probably going to be Primaris big. But they had to specially modify their armor so that way they can fit into it, and then that way they still have the use of Terminator armor. When they came back to the Imperium, they have their Gravis armor, they have the access to their jump packs, they have their incursor armors that they can swap in and out of, and it's just so that way that they have the versatility, because with 90 people left in your entire chapter, you just don't have any room for anybody to be complacent on one thing. Everybody has to be at the peak of everything, or the mission fails.
Okay. So because they have so low of units, did they get any Primaris reinforcements?
So
From Rabute?
no, they did not get any Primaris reinforcements. So the way that their mutation works is that they no longer abide by gene seed at this point. So they don't have the liberty of getting Primaris reinforcements, because since they're Primaris already, that means that they're really already fully grown Space Marines, that they just wouldn't survive the transition to being a Sunset Dragon. So that's why they only recruit from their home world, because they know that at least there they will get at least one or two people out of possibly getting none.
Okay.
It'll be a hard life being a Sunset Dragon.
Yeah,
sounds like
it's
the
almost Lamenter
sounds like it's gonna
hard
be a
for
hard
them,
life
because
being a
they just
Sunset
don't
Dragon, huh?
have the freedom of just going out to Walmart and picking up 4 dudes and being like, guess what? You're Sunset Dragons now.
Right.
And that's
Keep going with the questions. They're pretty good questions.
We'll invite on the person who created
We'll invite on the person who created the light bears sometime later, once we kind of have more of a kind of organization to the podcast. Because this is a podcast, it's not like it's going to be a TV show or anything like that. But yeah, and as I mentioned before, I'll in fact put it in the chat right now. We actually have an email where you can send your submissions to kind of get your people in the overall scheme of the 40K community and universe that we're creating.
Did the Crimson Wolves get Primaris reinforcements? And what did the Crimson Wolves think?
Did the Crimson Wolves get Primaris reinforcements? And what did the Crimson Wolves think of them? So, the Crimson Wolves did get Primaris reinforcements. They did not like them at all. They thought that they were the purest form of Space Marines that they could possibly be, because they're from the Horus Heresy. They are genuinely pure, because their gene seed came from their Primarch itself. So they didn't like the Primaris reinforcements because they thought that they were impure and they were tainted by the Mechanicus. Over a good amount of time, the Primaris reinforcements did actually prove themselves to the Crimson Wolves through a long and arduous journey, though. And actually, after the Battle of Cadia, Baldur Crimson Wolf, the chapter master of the Crimson Wolves, became Primaris himself. He took on the Primaris Rubicon and became a Primaris Marine.
It's so difficult to find my hobby supplies right now.
Yeah, especially since you just moved into a new spot.
It's so difficult to find my hobby supplies right now.
Yeah, especially since you just moved into a new spot.
I'm over here just trying to get my painting station up, and it's just
Sunset Dragons participated in
Have either the Crimson Wolves or Sunset Dragons participated in any major conflicts? Yes, the Crimson Wolves have participated in some of the major conflicts that have happened in the universe, specifically the Space Wolf ones.
Fall of Cadia, the Month of Shame. Of course, they participated in the Horse Heresy. They participated in. They are going to participate in the Arterius War. I just need to write more for that. They participated in 2 homebrew campaigns: the Battle of Twilight Blades and the War of Wrath. So there are 5 major campaigns that they are currently a part of.
The Month of Shame. Of course, they participated in the Horus Heresy. They participated in. They are going to participate in
So for Sunset Dragons,
Arterius
the
War.
last
I
big
just
war
need
that
to
they
write more for that.
participated up until after the
They
Horus Heresy
participated in
was
2
the
homebrew
Ishvan 5
campaigns,
massacre.
the Battle
But
of
they were
Twilight
kind of
Blades, and
participating
the
the whole
War of
time because
Wrath.
they were still part
So
of the
there are
Legion.
5 major
But
campaigns
after that, they just kind of
currently a
went
part of.
blank, and
What about
nobody
the
knew
Sunset
where
Dragons? Was
the
there any
rest
kind
of
of
the Legion went. So they were missing 150
big
dudes
campaigns that
after
they're a
this
part of?
massacre. And so they've been participating in trying to defend their small portion of the galaxy and their little solar systems because that's where they reside now. After the Horus Heresy was the Ishvan 5 massacre, but they were kind of participating the whole time because they were still part of the Legion. But after that, they just kind of went blank, and nobody knew where the rest of the Legion went. So they were missing 150 dudes after this massacre. And so they've been participating in trying to defend their small portion of the galaxy and their little solar system, because that's where they reside now.
Okay. So they're kind of apart from everyone, so they can't really participate in many of the campaigns that are really out there.
No, they can't. They don't have the leisure ability to hop in their ships and go to a different solar system and the other side of the galaxy to help out the Ultramarines. They're kind of stuck in their little solar systems because their space travel is limited to what the civilization they're a part of has.
I'll talk about some of the big alliances that the Wolves are part of right now. One of the really big ones is the White Bear. They are really
We have one person asking a lot of questions, and right now there's 3 people watching this. Besides, there's 5. I'm pretty sure Nate's one of them, and I know I'm one of them, so we got at least 3.
And it's House Theory or TC. That Night House has been in that sector since the Horus Heresy. They were holders of the war with them. They were spat out, and the principals just didn't make any contact. And as far as space train chapters go, the Cryptos have tight relations to the Light Bearers. They have tight relations to the Wolf Spears and all of the Space Wolf chapters. And they also are very good friends with the Ultra because they are significant chapter. They want to fight under the banner that the Imperium was under. And though we're pretty militarily, is kind of moving towards that. Another civil war. But they want to go back to what the Imperium used to do. And they can't do that without kind of pushing the Ultramarines towards that Space Wolves. Space Wolves aren't friends with a lot of them. What about the Sunset Dragons? Is there any Imperial allies that they have?
So obviously, Crimson Wolves they're going to be allies with. I actually, with the Lightbearers, I actually talked to Bryce, who is the owner of that chapter, and we both plan on having some conflict between both our chapters, just to kind of spice things up instead of just everybody being friends. Outside of that, they kind of dislike Mechanicus because they had to rely on building all their equipment, maintaining all their own equipment, and inventing all their own new equipment. So they really dislike Mechanicus because they kind of feel that it's not necessary when they're making equipment for everybody else when they don't really know how to use it. And Titan Legions, I don't believe that they'll be associating with any Titan Legions. There's a singular knight house that they'll be allied with, but it's only consists of one knight. I'll have more knights to kind of play around with because, knights are cool. But there's only technically one actual knight to that house.
So it's a night house. So he's a free blade, essentially.
Yeah, he's a free blade, but he is the knight of that solar system. And then Space Marine chapters, I'm thinking Blood Angels possibly. Other than that, I don't really think anybody else because, like I said, my guys are selfish. They don't intermingle themselves with lesser beings.
Yeah, they're dragons. Why would they be friends with anything other than dragons? Either the Crimson Wolves or the Sunset Dragons send their Marines to be a part of the Death Watch. Unless the Sunset Dragons here, I think because of how few their number is, I would say no. Am I right in saying that?
You're correct, but not because of how few there are, just because they believe that they're better than the Death Watch.
Better than the Death Watch. Okay. Well, they do, but they won't send like a mass amount because they are not codes to play, so they can give more ratings than probably everybody else can. But they'll only send about 5-10 Marines at a time. And it's considered to be actually a punishment to be a part of the Death Watch and a honor. Because the Death Watch means you're not doing the mission of the Crimson Wolves. You're not fulfilling the duty of what they're supposed to be doing. And you're away from the glorious battlefield of your battle. So it's more of a punishment than an actual honor.
Yeah, mine was simple. Just Dragon thinks, better than everybody else. Saves me kind of a headache there. But it means that there will definitely be conflicts between them and the Death Watch.
Yeah. Because they're using a Xenos race to But let's talk about the dragons for a second. Like, are these actual dragons that appear in different kinds of folklore?
So, yes. So, if I'm thinking correctly off the top of my head, because I love dragons, but I don't remember all the knowledge off the top of my head because there's just so much. So, if I'm thinking correctly, East European countries are the ones that are dragons with 4 legs and wings, which really those are true dragons. And they grow a lot bigger than most of the dragons you see on TVs because those are technically drakes where they have 2 legs and then just the wings that they walk on. So the dragons that are on the planet are the 4-legged massive dragons. And that's the reason why there isn't really a whole lot of threat to the planet, because there's massive dragons there to help defend it. And so those dragons are really the ones who are guiding the civilization, and it's kind of hard to argue with somebody that's 4 times the size of your castle.
So the Death Watch would view them as a Xenos race.
Yes, I would say the Death Watch would definitely see them as a Xenos race. Kind of like a championship crusade where we have defeated this great foe, we are making a new banner to commemorate this victory.
So the dragons are very like central to. So problem is that I got you. All right. So also these white bears sound pretty awesome. When did you say the creator was going to be on? He's going to be on whenever we kind of have a more succinct and organized portion of the podcast. Other than that, we're just going to be talking about our specific, and once we get more submissions soon. And I'm sure he would love to talk about it for hours and hours, but he's going to have to go through the same process as everyone and submit them to that Gmail that's posted in chat. Although I do know some of the lore off the top of my head, but that will be for a different day. This is only episode 1, and we are already over an hour.
Yeah, our end goal for this channel is to get participation from the entire community for who wants to participate. So eventually it's not just going to be our friends. Once we start getting enough foot traffic and everything, we'll probably create a Discord for the entire community. And we might actually just bring on people from the Discord into these chats, so that way they have the opportunity to talk about what they love and how it mingles with all the stuff that we love.
Just the end goal of this is going to be to create one giant. It's going to be very, very. Although the person in the library actually has to start painting his army, because I'm sure I have some of his units, but he's going to actually have to start painting some in order to have some hygiene while he's talking about this stuff.
You were going to ask me another question about my dragons. What was it?
The dragons are very central to the culture of the planet.
Yes.
How do they kind of behave?
So the dragons behave like any other dragons. They tend not to want to do much outside of what they want to do, but they're not really aggressive unless they view somebody as a threat to what they hold precious. So they actually hold those major cities that they protect as precious to them, because that's their civilization that they created. So they will do whatever it takes to protect their city.
So you say there's a dragon per city?
Not one dragon. It's more of like a family of dragons, because dragons tend to they breed with other dragons from different civilizations, and then that's how everything becomes intertwined between all the dragons. So they have all these cities, and since technically at some point down the line, hundreds, if not thousands, well, probably more along tens of thousands of years ago, their ancestors were the ones who founded these cities, molded these cities, produced guardians and heirs of their own to protect their cities. So all the cities will eventually have names based off the original dragons that created them. and then the ones who are protecting it are just the descendants of those dragons. But obviously, you know, they're depending on how big the city is and how much, you know, population there is will also determine, you know, just because there's a big city here, but its population can be like 2,000 people, the dragon who's defending it isn't probably very powerful and isn't very big. While there's a civilization over here that this castle has like a population of 100,000, there's probably going to be like 7 or 8 dragons, and 3 of them are going to be enormous.
Another question in here. How do the sunset dragons and crimson wolves view Xenos races and by extension Xenos? Roy, I'll let you go first on this.
So Xeno races, they lost touch with all of the what is it, psycho indoctrination that the Imperium did on them when they were little. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
So they kind of bypassed all that psycho indoctrination once they landed on this planet and realized that not all Xeno races are bad, as the dragons that they encountered kind of opened their eyes that Xenos deserve a place in the universe. They should also deserve a place within the Imperium, as long as they're not harmful to the grander structure of peace amongst everything. And obviously, if a Xenos race is a threat to anything that they hold dear to themselves or to like the overall peace of anything, they will interfere. And when they go against a Xeno race, it's not like, oh, we're going to have 2 or 3 small conflicts like with the Tau. It's more of like we're going on a purge of making sure everybody is eliminated. They're not going to viral bomb the planet. They will personally set foot on the planet and make sure that no one is left alive. And chaos, they believe that chaos is silly because dragons are the end all be all of power in the universe. So they will probably just demolish all chaos that are within their sight.
Okay, I think this will be the last little bit of tidbit of lore, and then the next episode we'll continue on with the explanation of the Sunset Dragons and the Crimson Wolves. But as far as Xeno races for the Crimson Wolves, they are imperial, so they absolutely despise them. Chaos even more so, because mentioned earlier, while there were notable campaigns, the War of Wrath was against the Chaos warrior known as the Fourth War, which is also another homebrew Chaos kind of faction that I created. But they genuinely have a hate for Xenos and Chaos. So, as I said, that's kind of the end of this episode. Thank you for joining us.